The courtroom was unusually loud that morning. Whispers floated through the air like static before a storm. Cameras rolled, capturing the woman in the pink floral dress as she marched toward the plaintiff's podium. Chin high, confidence dripping from every exaggerated step. Her name was Patricia Winters, though everyone online would soon know her by a different name, Fat Karen. She came to the show claiming she'd been cheated out of money by her former landlord. But the truth was, Patricia hadn't come for justice. She'd come for attention. She wanted the spotlight, the viral clip, the moment she'd put Judge Judy in her place. And she was about to get it, just not the way she expected. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Judge Judy entered quietly, carrying her usual folder of notes and a single pen. Her stride was smaller that day, her voice softer than usual when she greeted the audience. There was something almost fragile in her tone, something that made people underestimate her in the first few minutes. Patricia noticed it immediately, the slower walk, the smaller voice, and smirked like a wolf who'd just seen weakness. She thought Judy looked tired, maybe even intimidated. But what Patricia didn't know was that the calmness she was mistaking for weakness was the silence of calculation, the kind of silence that only comes before truth crushes arrogance. Patricia rolled her eyes before Judy even finished introducing the case. Finally, she muttered loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "Let's see if this old lady even understands what's going on," the audience murmured. Judy glanced up briefly, just a flicker of her eyes. No reaction, no anger, no emotion. She simply turned the page and began reading the file. Patricia mistook that quiet for surrender. She didn't know that every time Judy's pen clicked, she wasn't just writing, she was preparing her next move. "Ms. Winters," Judy began, her voice calm and even. "You're claiming your landlord owes you $300 for property damages, correct?" "That's right," Patricia snapped. "And don't act like you're doing me a favor by listening, okay? You judges think you're smarter than everyone." Judy's eyes stayed on the paper. She didn't flinch. Patricia leaned closer, hungry for dominance. "You're just reading whatever they hand you," she sneered. "You don't even know the law like real judges. You're just a TV actress." Gasps filled the courtroom. The bailiff froze mid-step. Judy slowly set her pen down and looked up, finally meeting Patricia's eyes. "I beg your pardon?" Patricia folded her arms. "You heard me. You act all high and mighty, but you don't even let people talk. You're not as smart as you think." For a few seconds, the entire room was silent. Even the cameras stopped panning. Then Judy leaned back in her chair, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "I don't let people talk when they lie." Patricia blinked. Judy's tone hadn't risen an inch, yet every word carried enough authority to slice through the air. Because truth doesn't need volume, it needs proof. But here's where the real twist began, and a detail no one noticed yet. The folder on Judy's desk wasn't just Patricia's complaint. It also contained a background report. One that mentioned a case Patricia had been involved in 3 years earlier. Same city, same accusations, same lies. Judy already knew this wasn't Patricia's first time faking evidence for money. She just hadn't said it yet. She was letting Patricia bury herself first, one insult at a time. As Patricia rambled on, calling the landlord a thief and Judy a fake, the audience's laughter began turning into discomfort. Some people covered their mouths. Others whispered nervously. Judy didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She sat there, calm as still water, every insult bouncing off her like raindrops on marble, and that's what made it powerful. For once, Judge Judy wasn't the thunder in the room. She was the storm waiting to arrive. After nearly 2 minutes of ranting, Patricia leaned on the stand and shouted, "Are you just gonna sit there? Say something. You're the judge, right?" And that's when Judy did something no one expected. She smiled, slowly, almost kindly. "I will," she said, her voice steady. "But when I do, you won't like it." The courtroom went dead quiet again. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, but Judy had already turned the page in her folder. Her fingers brushed against a printed screenshot, one that would destroy Patricia's story entirely. But Judy didn't reveal it yet. She let the tension breathe, the silence stretch, because timing was everything. What no one knew, not the bailiff, not the audience, not even Patricia herself, was that this entire case wasn't just about missing money. It was about something much bigger. Judy had discovered that Patricia had filed multiple fraudulent claims across 3 states, and one of those cases involved a business Judy herself had invested in. Patricia had no idea she was standing in front of the very woman whose kindness she'd once tried to exploit. But Judy wasn't angry, and not yet. She was patient, because true justice doesn't rush. It waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself. And that moment, the one Patricia never saw coming, was only 45 seconds away. The silence after Judge Judy's calm warning seemed to stretch across every corner of the courtroom. Patricia Winters, however, mistook that silence for weakness, again. The smirk on her face grew wider, fueled by her own arrogance and the nervous laughter from a few people in the back row. "Yeah," she said mockingly, tapping her manicured nails against the stand. "That's what I thought. You don't even have anything to say, do you?" But Judy's expression didn't change. She simply adjusted her robe collar, glanced toward the bailiff, and said quietly, "Let her talk." Her voice was so even, so measured, that Patricia assumed she had already won. But the audience, the ones who had watched this judge for years, recognized something in Judy's tone. It was the sound that came right before the storm. Patricia started her story with the same confidence she had walked in with. She claimed her landlord stole her $300 deposit, lied about damages, and spread false rumors about her. She played the victim with the kind of rehearsed emotion that would fool anyone who hadn't heard it a dozen times before. She sighed dramatically, dabbed her eyes with a tissue she didn't need, and even added a little sniffle for effect. "I'm just tired of people treating me like I'm the problem," she said, her voice quivering at all the right moments. Judge Judy's eyes lowered to the papers again. She didn't respond. Patricia took it as approval and kept going, now turning her story into a monologue. "I've had to move 5 times this year because of toxic landlords. They all lie, and every time I try to stand up for myself I get treated like garbage. You wouldn't understand, Your Honor." You sit up there thinking you're perfect. A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. The defendant, a middle-aged man in a worn gray suit, shifted awkwardly, clearly restraining himself from interrupting. But Judy didn't stop Patricia. She was watching something deeper. The way her tone changed when she exaggerated. The parts of her story that sounded too smooth, too practiced. Judy had seen that kind of rhythm before, not from victims, but from performers. She glanced at the case file again and underlined a single line in the margin. Plaintiff previously involved in 3 small claims cases in 18 months. That alone told her everything she needed to know. Patricia wasn't unlucky. She was strategic. The kind of person who looked for loopholes, not justice. As Patricia droned on, Judy's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Not with pity, but with understanding. She'd dealt with people like this for decades, loud, defensive, and addicted to sympathy. But what most of them never realized was that Judy had once been underestimated herself. Decades ago, as a young female prosecutor in a male-dominated courtroom, she'd learned the value of silence, how to let arrogance expose itself. So while Patricia thought she was winning, Judy was remembering every time someone had called her stupid too, and how she'd turned that insult into a weapon. Patricia finished her speech with a flourish, tossing her tissue onto the stand like it was a stage prop. "So yeah," she said, "I'm done being walked all over. This time I'm getting what I deserve." Judy lifted her eyes from the folder, her tone deceptively calm. "You said you've moved 5 times this year, correct?" "That's right," Patricia said proudly. "Because every place I go, people take advantage of me." Judy nodded slowly. "Every place?" "Yes. Every landlord?" "Exactly." Judy tilted her head. "Do you ever notice a pattern in your stories, Ms. Winters?" Patricia blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Judy said, leaning forward slightly, "in all 5 of those cases, the same thing happened. The same amount of money, the same complaints, the same accusations. Doesn't that seem unusual to you?" Patricia laughed nervously. "That's not a pattern, that's bad luck." Judy's eyes sharpened. Bad luck doesn't file the same lawsuit template 5 times with the same wording and the same handwriting on each document. The room went silent again. The defendant's eyes widened. Patricia froze. Judy continued, her tone almost gentle. "You're not unlucky, Ms. Winters, you're repetitive. And in law, that's not bad luck, and that's a habit," Patricia stammered, trying to recover. I don't know what you're talking about." Judy smiled faintly, just enough to disarm her. "Oh, I think you do. Because this isn't your first performance. You've done this before, haven't you?" Patricia's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, her confidence faltered. The audience could feel it. The shift in energy was subtle but unmistakable. She looked smaller now, her arms crossing defensively. The bailiff handed Judy another paper, quietly, one she had requested before the hearing began. Judy glanced at it briefly, then said, "According to the court records, Ms. Winters, you've previously sued a landlord in Baton Rouge, and another in Houston, and another in Tampa. In all 3 cases, you claim the same damages, $1,300 exactly. Care to explain that coincidence?" The color drained from Patricia's face. Those were different situations," she said, her voice trembling. "Were they?" Judy asked. Because this document says otherwise. She lifted the page slightly so the cameras could catch the printed list of cases. The audience gasped again. Patricia tried to interrupt, but Judy raised one finger, not angrily but firmly. "Don't speak," she said softly. "You've spoken enough for today." For a moment, Patricia looked like she might cry. But instead, she did what people like her always do when cornered. She lashed out. "You think you're so perfect," she shouted. "You're just a bully with a robe." And just like that, the calm in Judy's eyes returned, that same unnervingly quiet strength that had built her reputation for decades. She didn't need to shout. She didn't even need to defend herself. She just let the weight of Patricia's words hang in the air until the silence itself became the answer. Then Judy said, "If standing up for truth makes me a bully, then I'll wear that title with pride. But you'll wear the consequences." That single line hit harder than any gavel. The audience broke into hushed murmurs, and Patricia's expression finally cracked. Her performance was over, but what she didn't realize was that Judy wasn't finished, not even close. Because the next piece of evidence she was about to reveal would not only destroy Patricia's case, it would destroy her credibility forever. And Judy, the so-called stupid old lady, was about to prove that the quietest person in the room was always the most dangerous. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Patricia's confidence had thinned like air at high altitude. She was still standing but barely breathing. Her eyes darted between the audience and the judge's desk, searching for any kind of support, but none came. Even the cameras seemed to lean closer now, as if the entire room were holding its breath, waiting for Judge Judy's next move. Judy lifted a single sheet from the file, tapping it lightly against the bench. "Ms. Winters," she began, her tone even quieter now, a whisper sharp enough to cut glass. "I want to read you something." She adjusted her glasses and read aloud. Plaintiff filed identical small claim suits in Baton Rouge, Houston, and Tampa between 2021 and 2023, each dismissed due to falsified evidence. Does that refresh your memory? Patricia's lips trembled. That's not true. Judy raised her eyebrows slightly. It's not? Because the clerk's office seems to think otherwise. She set the paper down with deliberate care, the way a surgeon might lay down a scalpel. And you know what's interesting? She added, leaning forward just slightly. In every single one of those cases, you used the same photographs as evidence. The same scratches on the wall, the same broken window, the same stains on the carpet. The audience gasped again. Patricia froze, her voice breaking apart like glass under pressure. Those were examples. I didn't mean examples? Judy repeated softly. Under oath? That was it. Patricia's voice vanished completely. Judy didn't have to raise her tone. The strength in her restraint said everything. You came into my courtroom, Judy said slowly, and called me stupid. You called this court a performance, but the only one performing here today is you. Patricia's face flushed red, the bravado gone. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not of the cameras, not of the audience, but of the truth she'd dragged into the open herself. The defendant stood silent, watching the woman who had once humiliated him unravel in front of millions. Judy picked up her pen again, that simple gesture sending a chill through the room. I was going to ask more questions, she said, but I think you've already answered all of them. She paused, looking directly at Patricia. You wanted fame? Congratulations. You just earned it, for all the wrong reasons. Patricia blinked rapidly, her hands gripping the edge of the podium as if holding on to the last pieces of her pride. But Judy was done playing. I've seen arrogance, Ms. Winters. I've seen liars, manipulators, frauds. But rarely have I seen someone destroy themselves this efficiently. And with that, Judy lowered her pen, signaling the turning point everyone felt but no one dared speak. The real judgment hadn't been delivered yet, but everyone in that room already knew how it would end. The courtroom felt frozen in time. The audience barely moved, afraid that even a whisper might interrupt what was unfolding. Judge Judy sat motionless for a long moment, letting the weight of silence do what words couldn't. Patricia's hands shook as she clutched the edge of the plaintiff's stand, still pretending to look composed, but her eyes betrayed her panic. Her lips trembled, her chest heaved, and her smirk, that smug, defiant smirk she had walked in with, was gone. Finally, Judy looked up from the file and said, Bailiff, bring me Exhibit B. The bailiff nodded, walking over with a stack of documents and a glossy photograph clipped to the top. Judy examined it for a second, then turned it toward Patricia. Do you recognize this? She asked. Patricia blinked, trying to regain her balance. That's my old apartment. Judy nodded once. It is. And it's the same photo you used in 3 different lawsuits. One in Baton Rouge, one in Houston, and one in Tampa. You told each judge this was a different property, correct? Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Answer me. Judy's voice sharpened, quiet but unyielding. I didn't remember which photo I uploaded, Patricia stammered. It's just a misunderstanding. Judy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A misunderstanding doesn't come with 3 forged inspection reports and a fake landlord signature. The courtroom gasped again. Even the defendant turned toward Patricia, his eyes wide in disbelief. Judy flipped through the pages methodically, each one another nail in Patricia's self-made coffin. You know what the saddest part is, Ms. Winters? Judy said, her voice calm and cold. If you had just told the truth, I might have believed there was a real grievance here. But instead you tried to lie your way to fame, and you did it in my courtroom. Patricia's voice cracked. You don't understand. People don't take me seriously unless I make noise. Nobody listens unless I push back. Judy stared at her, expressionless for a beat, then replied softly, Oh, they listen. You just never had anything worth hearing. The audience went dead silent. That single line hit harder than a gavel. Patricia looked as if she'd been slapped. Her body deflated, shoulders sinking as she lowered her eyes to the floor. Judy didn't stop. She turned to the defendant and asked, Mr. Thomas, did you by any chance receive threats or messages from the plaintiff before the case? He hesitated, glancing at Patricia. Yes, Your Honor. 3 voicemails, and she said she'd ruin my business if I didn't pay her. Judy nodded, sliding the phone records from the folder. Already confirmed, she said, setting the evidence down like a final stone on the grave of Patricia's lies. The courtroom murmured again. Patricia's facade was gone completely now. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. She muttered something under her breath, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Judge Judy finally sat back, her tone lowering, not angry, but almost disappointed. You came in here today to call me stupid, but what you really revealed is how much truth you can't handle. I don't need to prove my intelligence, Ms. Winters. I just need to prove your deceit. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. Patricia's head fell, her arrogance stripped bare before millions of viewers who would soon see this moment replayed across the internet. Judy picked up her pen again, calm as ever. Case isn't over, she said, but the lies are. The audience erupted in soft murmurs again, the sound of justice finally beginning to rise. Patricia had no idea what else Judy was holding, because the biggest revelation hadn't even been shown yet. What came next wouldn't just destroy her case, and it would end her reputation forever. The tension in the courtroom had reached its breaking point. Patricia stood frozen, eyes wide, face pale, and hands trembling. The audience's murmurs had turned into a low hum of disbelief. Judge Judy remained calm, still as stone, the embodiment of authority wrapped in quiet composure. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her power came from precision and from timing. Then Judy reached for one final document, the one she'd saved for last. Ms. Winters, she said, her voice like ice. Before I give my ruling, there's something you should know. She flipped the page slowly, letting the silence stretch. When you filed this lawsuit, you submitted a letter claiming financial hardship, correct? Patricia nodded nervously. Yes, Your Honor, because Judy interrupted, firm but controlled. You claimed you had no job, no income, and no assets. Is that true? Yes, Patricia whispered. That's true, Judy's eyes narrowed. Interesting, she said, pulling a printed sheet from the folder. Because 2 days before you filed this case, you posted on social media about the grand opening of your boutique business in Baton Rouge. The room erupted in gasps. Patricia's knees almost buckled. That's not relevant, she shouted. It's very relevant, Judy replied sharply. You filed a false financial statement. That's perjury. Patricia's breath quickened. It wasn't a real business. It was just an idea. Judy cut her off with a flick of her hand. Enough. I've heard every excuse, every lie, every performance. But what you haven't realized, Ms. Winters, is that this courtroom isn't a stage. It's a mirror. And today you finally saw your reflection. The audience fell silent again. Patricia's face crumbled. The defendant exhaled in relief, tears in his eyes. Judy turned to him and said, Mr. Thomas, your counterclaim for damages is approved. You'll be compensated for the stress, time, and legal fees caused by this woman's deception. Patricia's head jerked up. Wait, you can't do that. Oh, I can, Judy said calmly. And I just did. The bailiff handed the ruling over and the cameras zoomed in as Judy signed it. Patricia's lips trembled, tears finally spilling them, but they weren't the tears of an innocent woman. They were the tears of someone realizing that the act was over. The curtain had fallen and there would be no encore. Judy stood. Let this be a reminder, she said, looking straight into the cameras. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And the moment you lose your integrity, you lose everything. Patricia lowered her head, defeated. The same mouth that once called Judy stupid couldn't form another word. If you think Judge Judy handled this with pure class and intelligence, comment respect below. Let's see how many people still believe in real justice and truth over arrogance. The gavel never sounded louder than it did that day. Judge Judy's final words still echoed in the courtroom long after she left her seat. Patricia Winters stood motionless, her eyes empty, her body trembling. The same woman who had strutted into the courtroom with arrogance now looked small, a shadow of her former self. She didn't even try to argue. There was nothing left to say. The defendant walked out slowly, clutching the signed papers like a victory that didn't come from pride, but from relief. "Thank you, Your Honor," he had said quietly before leaving, and Judy had only nodded. That small gesture meant more than any speech. Justice didn't need applause. It just needed truth. Patricia sat down on the bench behind her podium, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. The audience, once entertained by her loud performance, now avoided looking at her. Even the cameras seemed to pull back, capturing the bitter reality that arrogance always ends in silence. She looked around as if hoping someone, anyone, might defend her. But no one did. Not this time. Judge Judy gathered her papers neatly, her movements graceful and unhurried. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply said to her bailiff, "Let's move to the next case." That was the power of real authority, never needing to prove it twice. As Patricia shuffled out, reporters waiting outside pointed cameras her way, but she covered her face, whispering, "No comment." The clip of her meltdown would later spread online, racking up millions of views. People called it the day Judge Judy silenced a bully. Others called it the 45-second karma. But for Judy, it was just another reminder of why truth always outlasts noise. Back in her chambers, Judy paused for a moment and looked at the stack of upcoming cases. Different names, same patterns, but she smiled faintly, because as long as she sat behind that bench, arrogance would never win twice. When the cameras stopped rolling and the courtroom emptied, the echo of Patricia Winters' downfall still lingered in the air. The walls that had heard her arrogance now held only silence. Outside, the world kept spinning, but inside that courtroom something had shifted. Not just for the audience, not just for Patricia, but for everyone who had forgotten what real justice sounds like. Judge Judy sat alone for a few moments after the case concluded, quietly reviewing her notes. Her robe still neatly pressed, her pen still beside her. To the viewers, it had been another viral episode, another dramatic confrontation destined for millions of views. But to Judy, it was more than that. It was a mirror of something she'd seen her entire life. Pride pretending to be power, noise pretending to be truth. And every time it ended the same way, silence. She looked down at the folder one last time before closing it. Patricia Winters versus Daniel Thomas. The words meant nothing now. The ruling had been signed, the case was over, and justice had been done. But what lingered wasn't the paperwork. It was the reminder that arrogance doesn't just embarrass people, it exposes them. When she finally left her bench and stepped into the hallway, a few crew members smiled at her, half expecting a witty remark or a laugh. But Judy was quiet, thoughtful. "She wasn't a bad person," Judy said softly to her bailiff. "Just lost in her own noise." The bailiff nodded slowly. "You handled it perfectly, Judge." Judy gave a faint smile. "No," she replied, "truth handled it. I just gave it a voice." Outside the courthouse, Patricia was learning what it felt like to have that same truth echo back. She'd once believed power came from being loud, that winning an argument meant talking over others. But her voice, the one she'd used to insult and interrupt, had become her own undoing. Clips of her calling Judge Judy stupid went viral within hours, flooding social media with millions of views. But what people shared most wasn't her insult. It was the moment Judy looked her in the eye and said, "The only performance here is yours." That line became a symbol of poetic justice. Viewers from around the world commented how it wasn't anger that defeated Patricia, it was composure. Judy didn't need to yell. She didn't need revenge. Her calm was enough to destroy every lie in the room, and maybe that's why millions of people kept rewatching that moment, because it reminded them that silence can be the loudest response of all. The following week, a letter arrived at the courthouse. It was handwritten, shaky, and unsigned, but Judy recognized the name printed at the top, Patricia Winters. Inside, a single line stood out. "I thought you were cruel. Now I understand you were fair." Judy didn't frame the letter. She didn't talk about it. She just tucked it away in her drawer. The same drawer filled with notes, photos, and mementos from years of cases where truth had finally spoken louder than pride. She didn't need to forgive Patricia. The lesson had already been delivered, not just to her, but to millions watching. Later that evening, Judy walked past her office window, the New York skyline glowing outside. She paused, looking at her reflection in the glass. Older now, wiser, but still unshakably sharp. So many people had underestimated her over the years. Men in suits, lawyers with egos, plaintiffs like Patricia. All of them thought the same thing, that she was just another voice in the crowd. But time had proven something stronger. She wasn't the voice, she was the echo that lasted after the shouting stopped. She smiled faintly to herself, whispering. They always forget until they're reminded. Then she turned off the lights, leaving the courtroom in silence, the same silence that had once humbled an entire audience. Because that's the thing about justice. It doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes in a whisper, a quiet truth that dismantles arrogance without ever raising its tone. And that day, Judge Judy didn't just win a case. She reminded the world that power doesn't come from shouting louder. It comes from standing taller, even when you're underestimated. So when Patricia Winters called her stupid, she thought she was tearing her down. But in that single insult, she revealed her own downfall. And in less than 45 seconds, she learned what millions already knew, that you can't humiliate truth. You can only expose yourself trying, and that's why the world keeps watching. Not for the drama, not for the insults, but for that rare moment when arrogance collapses under the weight of honesty, and justice stands alone, undefeated, unshaken, and still perfectly calm. If you believe in real justice, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard, and then subscribe right now. Comment "Truth always wins" below to let the world know that no matter how loud the lie gets, the truth always finds its voice.